Tom Sellin has a way of explaining how Airwallex's embedded finance offering works. He uses a Lego set. You have all the individual pieces: wallets, cards, payouts, and FX. And the platform or fintech company on the other side decides what they want to build. A small car? A rocket ship? Just one piece, if that is all they need? The point is that you're not buying a finished product. You are choosing which building blocks to plug into your own. Tom is the first person on the ground building Airwallex in Germany. Overall, the company has 26 offices, 85 licenses, and infrastructure that already powers companies like Moss and Naven. His job is to make sure German platforms and fintech companies know that infrastructure exists and can access it. In this episode, we get into how the embedded finance layer actually works, who is already using it and why, and what the build versus buy decision looks like when you need to move money across 150 countries without spending 18 months getting a license. This episode was recorded live at FIBE, the FinTech Berlin conference, where Tom and I sat down in between sessions to have this conversation. My name is Lars Markel, and I am the founder of Embedded Finance Review. Embedded Finance Review is a newsletter, podcast, and event series covering the European embedded finance ecosystem. And if you're exploring an embedded payments, banking, or lending product for your platform or service, I offer free intro calls where I share honest feedback and connect you with the right providers and partners. Sounds interesting? You can book a call at embeddedfinancereview.com. And now, let's dive in. Hi, Tom. Welcome to the Embedded Finance Review podcast, live here at FIBE. How are you doing today?
I'm fine. Thanks, Lars, and thanks for having me. I'm very excited to be here, and obviously quite a different setting, gives a lot of energy being surrounded by people here at FIBE as well.
Exactly. I can look out here of the tiny space, seeing all the people walking past and listen to our conversation here. Tom, we're going to talk a lot about Airwallex today, obviously, talking about the company's product offering, but also specifically the embedded finance angle. But before we do that, maybe we dive a little bit into your background. And famously, Steve Jobs once said, you can only connect the dots when you look back. And now most recently, you've took on the role of leading growth here in the DACH market for Airwallex. If you look back in your past career steps, what was there that made you ready for this position?
Yeah, so I would say these are three steps that brought me to this point. I started my career 14 years ago at a rocket venture called Pay11, that was later so to sum up. And actually, I was the first person in the sales team selling point of sale solutions. So we went from Saarbrücker Straße out to Kollwitzkiez to trying to sell our POS solution to restaurants and trying to convince them to actually accept card payments, whether I would say like cash payment was still predominant, or we were at Airport Tegel trying to convince taxi drivers and giving out these dongles. So that was actually 14 years ago, quite some time. I think the second step was definitely my PayPal time. So I was 5.5 years at PayPal. I joined there as an account executive, and I was really kind of surprised by the power of the PayPal button or PayPal as a wallet itself before PayPal also decided to expand into the platform space. So PayPal acquired a company that called Braintree that was incorporated into the PayPal organization. And after 1 year being at PayPal, someone approached me and asked me, would you be willing to take over responsibility for Braintree and DACH and actually build the whole go-to-market strategy there? And while like the platform piece was still kind of fairly undiscovered, Braintree was very like well known within internationally, but in Germany they were really struggling to get a hold of because they were predominantly focused on cards. We built up the whole team there. We won the first customers like Zooplus, for example, and built up the whole go-to-market strategy there. Looking back at kind of, obviously you could make a whole podcast episode about PayPal and where it is today, but actually quite interesting that they actually struggle to kind of incorporate all these different products with Hyperwallet, Braintree, and PayPal into one product now. And I think the last step before joining Airwallex was my time at Clearpay. So I took the role as a country manager there, also like the first person on the ground, again, localization, passporting the license from the Bank of Spain to the German regulator, building up the team there. And I later took also the responsibility of the whole commercial structure within EU as well, and where I really went into the aspects of go-to-market, regulation, risk, and all these kind of different aspects actually.
And now with Airwallex, you're obviously working with a company that's massive on an international fintech scale, right? I think I just read another news article by your company yesterday, and what was mentioned, there are 26 offices worldwide holding 85 licenses. That's a massive beast for sure. However, here in Germany, the brand, if I go walk around here and ask a few people, of course, know Airwallex, but it's not maybe the household name as it would be at other fintech conferences. So what made you the switch of saying like, yes, this is definitely the kind of company I want to push in the German market?
Yeah, it's interesting. I would say like from a personal perspective, it's really the broad of the platform. And I think we are going a little bit deeper into that, like on the following kind of as podcast goes. But I would say I've been selling like point of sale solution. I've been on the payment side. I've been like a little bit also working with spend solution. But Airwallex really combines all these kind of different products into really one financial operating system, and then makes it so interesting because you have these global infrastructure with almost 3,000 employees. The company exists like 10 years. You have all these 26 offices around the world, but in Germany, no one knows about it actually. So probably it changes now, but it's actually quite an interesting opportunity.
Yes, and I heard it from many people who have taken over roles at German companies, being the first German person on the ground for an international fintech. There's always a lot of education that needs to happen internally. I just spoke to somebody who wasn't able to buy his dinner yesterday because he didn't have cash with him at the Berlin place. Maybe let's not talk too much about the cash aspect. But in your couple of months now in the role, being the German guy, so to say, for Airwallex, did you already find yourself in the position that you need to educate the people at the headquarters about the German specifics in fintech?
Yeah, it's interesting, right? I mean, I've seen also other fintechs or other like SaaS companies when they want to expand to Germany and obviously it's Germany. It's one of the largest economies of the world. We need to expand there and we need to have like a presence there. So what are we going to do? Let's put a salesperson in the market. Let's try them to sell the product. And then obviously after 4 to 5 months, when new deal closes, they actually kind of, okay, well, what's going to happen? Let's the pipeline review, don't see kind of the deals emerging. And you ask yourself, okay, why don't we have why are we not making any progress in that market? And usually what people underestimate that obviously you have to really get it right. You cannot cut corners. You actually have to get what I call minimum viable localization right. You have to actually take a look at how Germany actually functions. What are the requirements? You have to take a different step, but from a regulatory perspective. So there's so many different aspects about it. Like always people argue like Germany is a different market. Yeah, but it is. It can work, but obviously you have to invest it before and have to take a closer look how it will work.
Are there one or two specific things that in terms of like product feature, I mean, we're going to talk about the product in a bit.
Yeah.
Like one or two product features that are very like German specific for Airwallex?
Yeah. So I would say more, if we start like more from a culture perspective, right? And then move to product requirements or product features, I would say it's very surprising that we have a house bank culture. Yeah, what we call the home bank. So when I was like 14, my parents went with me to the Sparkasse, which was like maybe a street next, and I got like my Knacksheft and I opened a bank account in my name. And then like obviously you stick with the bank for decades, and you stay with that. And I think that's quite surprising for people looking at Germany, that people tend to stick also with their house bank for quite some time. So you need a lot of trust, you need a lot of education. The pain point needs to be actually quite big for them to be able to change their bank. And then in terms of you looking closer at what I call minimum viable localization features, so especially like on the accounting side, Dativ, it's actually quite interesting. Like if a tax advisor doesn't like the solution and if it's not properly integrated, so you can get the data obviously out of the operating system, the tax advisor will highly likely say no. And I've seen that on the payment side, deals failing while like an accounting department tax advisor say, okay, we cannot properly integrate it, or like Germany is not working without a Dativ connection. That's for sure. Yeah.
And I think that's where many companies have made, I mean, from different angles have made the same learnings. Where international teams and often say, well, we can also do it without. It's like, yeah, you technically maybe you can, but in the market you will actually not succeed with any of them.
Yeah, and I would say like last point is in terms of really localization expectations. So German expect like German language in the onboarding flow, in the web app, in the TNC, so many different kind of legal conversation. It's like, we don't expect like English TNC and English contract. I want to have it like in German otherwise, because we're not going to redline and review it. Yeah. And that's kind of really things. So that's what I'm saying, like you just have to get it right.
Yeah, and it shouldn't be the very fast translation that can just look a little bit clunky, because this again, when somebody reads it, will then create more friction and might confuse them to sign up.
Yeah, and a funny anecdote on that, right? I mean, I spent like also in the first weeks when we translated the German corp site to the English corp site to German, like we have an agency and we have like native people in these agencies, but also within Airwallex that translate it. But sometimes obviously they're missing a little bit the fintech context aspect of it. So I've seen translations, for example, with Bankschlangen, where they're trying to translate like waiting times within the bank to open a bank account, where you just review these and you obviously need to approve them before they're getting published. And sometimes I spent a lot of time in translation work over the last weeks.
Interesting. So Tom, let's dive a little bit more into the Airwallex offering. The structure and the way, obviously, here on the Embedded Finance Review podcast, we want to talk also quite a bit on the embedded finance angle.
Yeah.
But I think there's a good reason to start with your direct-to-business product offering. So maybe for those people here at FI, but also in the European and the German market who don't know Airwallex yet, how would you describe it in a couple of sentences?
So I would describe Airwallex as the global financial platforms. We are basically the operating system that empowers kind of modern businesses how they move money around the world. And that actually happens on, I would say, like two different pillars. So we have the direct business, obviously, where we support all-in-one business accounts. We allow our customers to open multi-currency wallets, and we actually allow them to transfer currencies to interbank rates. We have a card solution where you're able to issue cards. We have a full spend management solution and a billing solution. So that's the operating system, what we call it. But naturally, we also have what we call more the embedded finance or the infrastructure pillar. So all of these elements actually have one API attached to it, which allows kind of travel platforms or marketplaces to use also these kind of, let's say, parts of the pillars of the business, like individually, either kind of as a white label solution or partly white label or in a fully embedded way.
Makes sense. Yeah. And in the direct-to-business product offering, as you described, I mean, I guess there's some typical standard banking features, but of course, a lot of them are on a global, international, foreign exchange angle, where it's like different currencies and all these things. Does it mean the companies you are targeting are the bigger ones, or maybe where the businesses kind of touches multi-currencies, or who would be like your ICP when you go out here in the Berlin streets? Who would you try to convince to use this product?
Yeah, so we actually see three groups. I think the first one is really digital native scale-ups. So they actually, when they operate, they have supply in many countries and they're really global from day one. So usually companies like, for example, DeepL, they want to go global from the beginning because they set up also their teams in a global way. So that's really easy for us to position Airwallex as a primary financial hub, including multi-currency balance of X cards, team and spend, right? Because it saves actually a lot of time for them. The second group we are seeing is export-oriented SMEs in mid-market, especially in the e-com space. So we have a native Shopify integration and lots of, let's say, e-commerce companies that want to sell to Europe or more also like more broader internationally, use Airwallex actually on the payment side. So we use us actually to accept payments because we offer over 180 local payment methods also across the globe, even more exotic ones like, for example, Clearpay in Korea. So that's something where if you want to go global, also like an accepting payments, they primarily choose Airwallex. And I think the third one is more around larger platforms or enterprises. So they start with us by using us for treasury and payouts. So and sometimes embed them kind of within their own brand. Sometimes they do it white label. But like the pattern we see every time there's high cross-border volume, they would actually kind of, and when they have a spreadsheet on tracking these payouts, for example, or they pay high FX fees, they would tend to come to us.
Yeah, makes sense. And how does the Airwallex offering fits into these customers' usual, like the daily usage of financial products? Because also thinking back what you said at the beginning of the podcast, the quite German thing of having a house bank, like your main bank connection, where you're doing a lot of things, right? The product features that you described for the direct offering obviously makes it quite obvious you don't need the house bank or like the traditional bank anymore. You can do everything with Airwallex. However, I think in the second customer group that you described, it also sounded like there might be some who are using Airwallex for specific parts and not doing the full switch. So from your perspective, what is the more common one? Are there companies who like transferring everything to Airwallex, like the whole financial life, and then just live on Airwallex and may potentially have other softwares and solutions left and right of it? Or how do they use it?
Yeah, so I think what we see today is definitely that we exist alongside their bank or their house bank, right? But we own actually the global piece of it that's much more complex in that way. So while like the house bank is important and stays important for like tax advisors, for things like payroll, we are the global operating account. We connect the online revenues. We open that allows you to open accounts abroad, like even a local US account, for example, even if you don't have like an entity there, or even Hong Kong. Just had a conversation, which is obviously something that just very, very few fintechs would allow you to do. So we manage the FX payouts, we run cards and expenses. But I think like for younger digital companies, what I'm seeing as well, that they actually often become the primary account. So they test it in the beginning, and once they see that the experience works, they will switch over also their billing solutions to it, which is the entry point for actually collecting and accepting payments. So then all the incoming money flow goes actually into Airwallex, and they would use it also obviously to not only accept, but also to spend the money. And then you have like, let's say, the full platform solution with all the different added values where the different things actually connect into each other.
And this user journey is described, like how they use Airwallex in combination or replacing the house bank. Is it also something which, like, is it Germany unique, or when you look at Airwallex other businesses around the world, is that also common? Because I think, I mean, of course, in some countries, I guess Airwallex might be a household name already, and it might be like an easy, but I'm guessing, I mean, might be more of a German thing, but I'm guessing also in other countries, people also want to test, especially when it comes to financial services, right? At the end of it, it's your money, right? And especially for a company's money, this is also, you're relying quite a bit on that it works. I mean, even though if your money is never lost, but if it's not accessible for a certain time and you cannot pay salaries, that's obviously a big deal breaker as well. So how is this behavior in Germany compared to the rest of the Airwallex markets?
Yeah, so I think the disclaimer is that it's still like early in Germany. What we see is already that obviously Germans are a little bit more conservative in terms of kind of really moving all their money flows in towards what I call a neobank or like a digital bank away from the house bank. But we do have also some startups or scale-ups when they receive funding. They also want to use yield to deposit actually their funding into our yield accounts and to obviously receive yield on it, that they tend to be definitely more open. So it takes a little bit of trust to move, but once they move, it actually really works. And they see kind of that the different things actually connect together, and it saves them a lot of money and a lot of time.
Understood. I mean, Germany has not been known for being an underbanked market, right? There is, I think, plenty of providers out there. I guess it's fair to say maybe not everybody matches exactly your offering, but they might have another angle. Like now, the couple of months in the role here, building Airwallex in Germany, how's your reception? Like when you go to companies and potentially pitch them the new Airwallex solution, are they open for these features, or does it require quite a bit of like convincing and explaining because they think, yeah, I have already all these providers and tools in place?
Yeah. What's interesting about Germany is that even though it's a very competitive market, obviously you have Konto, you have Revolut here as well, right? N26, obviously. But 80% of the SMEs, of 3.6 million SMEs, are still with their traditional bank. So they're still with Deutsche Bank, for example, right? Or Commerzbank and so on. And they have really huge pain points if they want to accept, for example, in a transaction out of US that goes over the SWIFT network. It takes 2 to 5 days until like the money arrives. And in addition to the speed, it's then not very intransparent in terms of cost. So usually you pay like a 2% FX fee on that if you obviously accept if the money arrives in USD rather than in euro. And this creates a lot of friction. So what we see is that if kind of customers come to us, they really have kind of a pain point, especially if they operate globally, because their money moves, what I say always, at yesterday's speed. It's not very fast, which creates cash flow issues. It's hard for them to pay suppliers, accept payments, and so on. And this friction moves them towards obviously our solution as well.
And how do you find these customers? What are your strategies to go after them, especially those who are maybe not so much in the digital space active already?
Yeah, so we have a couple of different channels actually. So we started with performance marketing a couple of weeks ago. So if you look up for an international bank account, you will obviously also find Airwallex on Google. You find us on LinkedIn. I think like building the brand is very important. I very much believe in indirect distribution partnerships. The whole partnerships model, working with partnerships, is very, very important for us to scale kind of the business further. And then obviously we are building like a team here in the Berlin office at Hoft as well, with account executives who will then prospect these certain go-to-market motions, talking to travel companies, talking to SaaS companies, like especially like in fintechs in Berlin as well, and building out these motions through outbound outreach.
Before moving into the embedded finance section and getting a little bit more on the API side, because you just mentioned it, what offices does Airwallex have in Europe? Obviously, now you're building the Berlin office. I'm sure there's an office in London. Are there also other markets where you have an office already?
Yeah, so I would say we have over 100 people in Paris as well. We are 140 people in Amsterdam, and actually we are right now opening an office in Barcelona as well. So yeah, we have currently over 100, I think it's 103 when I looked yesterday evening, open roles, which we need to hire. So we are rapidly expanding, and the talent team is, let's say, stuffed on trying to fill these roles as soon as possible.
Let's come to the embedded finance layer, the infrastructure you offer other companies to build banking products. And obviously, that's a space for itself. And I guess there are also other companies who have these, like, let's say, try to address two types of customers with a similar product. Maybe, I mean, obviously, you're only part of Airwallex now for a couple of months, but maybe you've noticed internally as well the discussion on this. Is the API embedded finance angle something that started later? Was it opportunistic? Was it always part of the plan and was just like happened to be started later? I'm quite keen to understand that a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. Obviously, embedded finance is such a huge space, right? What I always try to explain how this works at Airwallex is with a little bit like a small anecdote. So I have a game with my kids where when we go out for dinner or when we sit at a restaurant, we have 25 Lego pieces, like they're in a small box. And we have a set of cards where you can pull a card and it actually shows you like a scenario, for example, build a drone that's flying over a volcano, because it's a good, like for us to go over the waiting time before the food comes, because usually they're hungry. So
very smart. I'll copy that one.
That's a good one. So, and this is actually how I try to explain this also to people, how Airwallex works in terms of the embedded finance view, right? We have all these small Lego pieces and you actually have the decision of you want to build out of it, right? So it could be, for example, like a Lego Death Star or like a large rocket ship or whatever you actually need, but you can combine these very flexible in terms of what you need. And in terms of how we built this, like, I mean, the company is 10 years old, but I think it was very, very natural and an active decision really from the beginning to go for own licenses, for local rails, to build up compliance, to really have the infrastructure. So we really wanted to be something beyond just like an SME app and let platforms at some point, it was just natural to allow platforms at some to plug into these APIs.
I think it was quite clear. You mentioned a couple of times travel companies already in this podcast. What kind of companies are you targeting? Is it the same kind of companies that you also potentially target with your direct-to-business solution? Or who are the companies who are, you think, most likely going to go with an Airwallex finance embedded banking integration?
I think especially if you think about Germany, I can then give you like a couple of examples on some other customers that use embedded finance anyway. But in Germany, we see like a lot of demand from fintechs actually. So especially on the card issuing piece, on the global wallet piece. So it's mostly coming from fintechs, which is actually quite interesting because obviously Germany and especially Berlin, the fintech community is quite big. Yeah, you have a lot of fintechs actually offering their services here globally.
So basically, those are companies who are offering the services already in Germany and now want to potentially plug in features to offer, especially the international payments and banking features.
Yeah, and maybe to give you an example, so I think quite a prominent reference or a prominent case study is Moss. Mm-hmm. So Moss is a solution that offers corporate cards, and this is like a spend platform for mid-market companies, right? Which you would initially assume that they are a competitor to us, right?
Exactly.
But actually they're not. So we are very much collaborating in a way. They use Airwallex for global payments plus FX in a product that's called Pay with Moss, and to pay out to 150 countries, where this actually ties quite well into each other.
So if you were to compare the API and embedded finance integration product offering from Airwallex to, let's call it like a standard plain vanilla banking as a service provider, there's a lot more and it can be used a lot more modular, right? It's not like any company who wants to use your API embedded finance integration has to go for the full-fledged bank account and do like everything with Airwallex. It's more about specific features.
Yeah, for sure. And that's what I mentioned with the different Lego pieces, right? You can also select to have just one Lego piece and use it, for example, for payout, but use it like fully white label rather going the full integration, because that removes actually a lot of complexity. I mean, you can go global and have like a global coverage, but in terms of time to market, you can also go fast. If you want to build these rails on your own, I mean, if we're even talking about licenses, getting a license, then it takes you 1 to 1.5 years and like a 6-digit amount probably to be able to get that license, not talking about retaining it. But I think especially like time to market is a huge topic where these actually companies decide to use Airwallex infrastructure.
Especially those companies, I guess, also for whom it is an adjacent offering, maybe important to some customers, but also now going abroad and getting these licenses and doing all this is probably rather unrealistic.
I mean, you always have to ask yourself the question, do you want to have BaFin as your main audit? Not as a main audit, but not as a main point of contact, right? And so audience, yeah.
Fair point. You mentioned Moss already as one of the companies using. Are there any other ones, maybe also international examples, who are using Airwallex in an integration?
So another example here from Berlin would be Workmotion, for example. So they're HR, EOR record company, right? And use Airwallex as a treasury and payouts layer to fund their local accounts. So for example, when they have to pay contractors, sometimes in South America and so on, they're using our infrastructure.
So this company basically targets companies who have employees all around the world, and there's now maybe a German company who has staff in South America. And now, of course, Workmotion needs to, they get the money from the German company, but they, at the end of it, need to pay out the amounts to the person in South America, for example. And that's where they need the local rails to make that happen, so the person receives the money on their bank account or wallet or whatever they do.
Correct, right? Especially if they want to go broad and their main value proposition is to be able to obviously connect contractors or employees like also around the world with these fast growing companies similar to other companies like Deal. And I think one more global example would be Navan. Obviously, Navan is quite a well-known corporate travel expense tool. They use actually Airwallex for the card issuing and global treasury piece. So we actually fund their wallets. We help them settling travel and spend and supplies even for their own employees.
Okay, interesting. And now, coming back to your role building Airwallex in Germany, you have the direct-to-business offering, but you also have the integration solution, embedded finance, maybe as we call it here, offering that you provide. Do you currently have a focus on one or the other? I guess there are some activities that you're doing which are basically supporting both of them, but I guess there might be other activities who only go for one or the other. Like, how would you put the importance on the two different offerings?
So I would definitely say we support both. Obviously, when fintechs come to, for example, fintechs or SaaS companies come to us, we obviously go into the conversations and try to find a solution for what they want to do. I would say from a go-to-market perspective, especially when we're talking expansion, in the beginning, it's very, very important to go fast. So velocity is actually key because with velocity, you actually learn much, much faster around whether your product works. And this is the underlying question of go-to-market is, do we have product market fit in Germany? That's something we have to prove that is actually proven by the different go-to-market motions and the commercial traction that comes with it. So it's not a good idea. Is it like a good idea to chase a deal that potentially needs 1 year to integrate, set up connected accounts that takes obviously quite some time, right? And to be from a onboarding and contractual perspective, I don't think no, right? Why we support it and we have teams for that. My main goal is to go bottom up at the moment. We do not start from the almost bottom, but we start like within more, let's say, in the mid-market space, and we want to go fast. We want to get to thousands of active customers very, very soon and to close like accounts very, very quickly.
And then in the API embedded finance offering, you described already the solution, the feature that your customers can be using. But for me, it sounds like you don't really see yourself competing too much with the traditional banking as a service providers. And when I say traditional, I mean those names from like a Solaris, a Swan, and so on. Obviously, you could argue it's not so different. It's a banking as a service, embedded banking product. But then again, obviously, probably different kind of companies, different use cases they are going after than what Airwallex does, if I understood correctly.
Yeah, and these companies have been here in Germany for quite some time and also been very successfully. So my goal is not to come to a market and say, okay, we are outcompeting them, right? We're going to run them out of business in 2 and 3 years. Like my goal is to partner with them where it makes sense and provide like a better UX and a better customer experience, obviously, if it's to their end customers or to ours. So I would say there's so much potential still in Germany, as mentioned with the 80%, like still with house banks, there's so much room to go. So let's focus on kind of solving these problems first and rather like by not competing on this stuff.
And maybe like final question on the embedded finance API layer. When you go out, you mentioned the kind of companies you are addressing and then the size of companies you're going after. Is that then something that requires a very long sales cycle? Like who are the kind of people you're typically addressing and what's the pain points? I guess from my understanding with the Airwallex offering and the competitive environment or the other companies, what they're offering, it's probably a very strong focus on these companies who have issues with international payments and trying to solve that first and then maybe potentially even grow into using more of the Airwallex APIs later on.
Yeah, I think it starts a little bit from a pain point. Obviously, if you want to global more around from a licensing perspective, right? Do you really want to own these kind of license and go through the pain point and the kind of passporting them globally? I think that's the first decision they need to take. And it's always like a build versus buy decision. And it's something that obviously they take first. And then when they come to us, when we actually show them kind of what global footprint we have, kind of what we're actually able to, it's quite an easy decision because normally, as mentioned, right, you would need to go to at least 1.5 years. So there would at least you can go 2 years faster in terms of go to market also for these companies as well. Yeah, so I would say definitely global coverage that we offer like a single stack. one thing that we provide, the whole time to market, the avoided cost that comes to it, and definitely like kind of the flexibility and the UX control, because you can also obviously take out just pieces of it. For example, we have an embedded KYC solution, which you can then fully embed within your UX as well.
You did mention that the strong focus of your role and I guess your team now here in Germany is to find product market fit. How do you see the next couple of years evolving? I mean, we read as well in the news that Airwallex is willing to spend a substantial amount of money on building the business in Germany and also in Europe, but also specifically in Germany. What do you think is achievable in the next 3 to 5 years?
So in Germany, my goal is on the direct pillar to really become the default global financial platform for German SMEs and scale-ups, right? So we're talking about thousands of active DACH customers using accounts, FX, payouts, cards, and really kind of the integrated accounting and e-com solution that come with it, either on the e-com side, Shopify or Shopware, or when it's on the accounting side, Dativ, SAP, or Lexware. On the embedded side, we really want to be the quiet backbone that sits behind these core tools. That it's on the travel side for B2B platforms, where kind of we move the money flow in the background where our logo isn't visible. And I think overall, we really want to achieve like in a mindset shift. So when like a founder or CFO thinks of like we need global accounts or we need embedded finance, he thinks of Airwallex.
Mm-hmm. Today we are both attending here FIBE in Berlin. It's a fintech conference, obviously. You did mention a couple of times now travel and also a few other industries. Does it mean Tom and his team are also going to go on non-fintech events and conferences to find companies in that space? Or what's the strategy?
So we have a couple of events planned still this year. So I think we will for sure be on Accounting Summit. Yeah, I think that's quite clear, right? Because you have also it fits 100% our ICP. We might be at Bits and Breadsits as well, because obviously it fits quite well. The founders and the scale-up piece also helps us in building our brand. So I would say definitely makes sense to be wherever kind of our key audience or kind of our ICP is.
Of course. Thanks, Tom, for the discussion. Interesting story. As usual, my last question, I mean, no, he's a first-time in-person recording, so it's a little bit different, but there's the usual last question. If there's somebody out there who wants to learn a little bit more about Tom maybe, or also about Airwallex, what's a good way to get in touch with you?
Yeah, just drop me a message on LinkedIn. I'm always happy to have a conversation. Thanks for having me. It was a very interesting conversation.
I'll make sure to follow Airwallex. Let's see what comes next.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you for listening. If you like this episode, make sure to follow the Embedded Finance Review podcast in your favorite podcasting app. And if you know somebody with an interesting embedded finance story to tell, please let me know. Until next time.